What if the most terrifying creatures of myth, vampires, hybrids, even the Antichrist himself, were all born from one forbidden union? A human and a demon. Across history, whispers of these half-breeds echo in secret texts of demonology, stories of beautiful but cursed children wielding powers beyond comprehension. They walk among us, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the day when good and evil clash in their final war. Tonight, we unravel the dark mystery of Demi-Demons, the hybrid sons and daughters of hell. In the secret manuscripts of medieval demonology, one question haunted scholars, priests, and occultists alike. Could demons truly breed with mankind? The answer was never spoken lightly, for if true, it meant that humanity was not only vulnerable to possession, but to corruption of blood itself. Long before the Middle Ages, cultures whispered of such unions. In Mesopotamia, the Lilitu, precursors of Lilith, were said to seduce men, stealing seed to birth children of shadows. In Greek myth, the gods often took mortal lovers, and some demonologists argued that demons too could mimic this practice, but with darker intent. In Jewish mysticism, tales of Shedim spoke of beings neither angel nor man, born from unholy couplings at the dawn of creation. By the time of the medieval church, these stories crystallized into warnings. Demons were not content with merely tormenting humanity. They sought to merge with it. But how? Demonology teaches that demons are spiritual, formless entities, shadows of fire, smoke, and corruption. To reproduce, they must first assume biological form, a fleshly body crafted from their will, shaped to deceive. This form could appear beautiful, seductive, irresistible. A demon in flesh was said to radiate charm, whispering promises of power, wealth, or forbidden knowledge. But within that beauty lurked danger. Their blood carried the essence of hell itself. Yet even here, there was a barrier. It is said no demon can force life into existence without the consent of the human soul. Not mere physical submission, but something deeper. The human spirit must, consciously or unconsciously, accept. Priests of the Middle Ages argued this was God's safeguard, that the soul itself acted as a shield. But demonologists countered the shield could be broken. Through lust, despair, or corruption, a human could invite the demon in. And once that invitation was given, a new life could be forged. These children were rare, but feared. Neither wholly human nor fully demon, they became known as Demi-Demons, hybrids of flesh and shadow, immortal yet mortal, walking paradoxes that blurred the line between heaven and hell. Some manuscripts describe them as ambassadors of darkness, serving as living channels between earth and the infernal realm. Others saw them as weapons, sleeper agents planted among mankind, awaiting the day when good and evil would wage their final war. But why would demons pursue such unions at all? Theologians offered chilling theories. Some believed it was out of love, a perverse mimicry of angelic unions with mankind. Others believed it was strategic to create offspring who could walk freely on earth without drawing the full wrath of heaven. And some whispered that each hybrid was part of a prophecy, paving the way for the final and most powerful demidemon of all, the Antichrist. Thus, the origins of the demon-human hybrid were never just about lust or accident. They were about warfare, a battle fought not with swords, but with bloodlines. And every demi-demon born was another step in the slow, secret invasion of hell. In the vast library of demonology, one question has haunted occultists for centuries. Are vampires truly a separate species of monster? Or are they simply the offspring of demons? Medieval demonologists proposed a chilling answer. When a human is fully possessed by a demon, body, mind, and soul overtaken, that body becomes fertile. If such a vessel then mates with another human, the child carries only a fragment of the demon's essence, not half, but a quarter. And from that unholy fraction, the vampire was born. This theory placed vampires squarely within the hierarchy of hybrids, not as myths of their own, but as sub-breeds of demi-demons, diluted yet cursed with hunger and darkness. The earliest bloodlines, known in occult manuscripts as the first generation, were terrifying. When they fed or revealed themselves, their features twisted into monstrous forms. Their eyes blazing crimson, skin stretched tight over protruding veins, mouths splitting wide to reveal 4 fangs, 2 upper, 2 lower. They were closer to demons than humans, grotesque, unrestrained, and openly monstrous. But over centuries, as their blood spread and diluted, later vampires evolved. They carried only 2 fangs, looked entirely human, and could walk unnoticed in society. Their beauty and charm became their camouflage. And unlike demi-demons who wielded psychic magic, vampires specialized in predation, luring, seducing, feeding. The Church, unable to categorize them, branded them children of the night, half-demon scavengers who walked the thin line between pestilence and plague. Long before the medieval term vampire emerged, cultures across the world described eerily similar figures. In Babylonian lore, the Ekimu were restless spirits who fed on the living. In Slavic traditions, the Upir was a corpse risen from its grave to drink blood. In Chinese demonology, the Jiangshi, hopping corpses, drained the life force of the living. In Greek myth, the Empusa, a vampiric demoness, lured men to their deaths. Demonologists argued these were not separate myths at all, but cultural glimpses of the same reality, the spread of demonic blood through human veins. Vampires inherited fragments of their demonic ancestry. They possessed enhanced strength and agility, heightened senses of smell and hearing, the unnatural longevity that defied human time. But unlike their demi-demon cousins, they were bound by restrictions. Sunlight weakened or destroyed some bloodlines. Crosses, holy water, and sacred fire burned them more easily because their diluted blood carried more humanity, less infernal essence. Demi-demons were resistant, but vampires were vulnerable, their human side acting as a doorway through which holiness could strike. Their endless thirst for blood was not just survival, it was inheritance. Demonologists wrote that vampires feed because they lack a complete soul. The demonic essence inside them craves vitality, hungering endlessly for the life force of others. Thus, every bite was not only an act of feeding, but a ritual, a small sacrifice, fueling the demonic bloodline within. In the hierarchy of hybrids, vampires were not the generals. They were the soldiers, the scouts of Hell's army, spreading terror, preying on villages, breaking humanity's spirit. And wherever vampires spread, whispers of greater hybrids followed. Demi-demons, waiting in the shadows, commanding from afar. To demonologists, the vampire was not just a creature of folklore, it was proof that the boundaries of blood could be broken, proof that demons had succeeded, not only in corrupting souls, but in corrupting entire bloodlines. If vampires were the quartered demons, the diluted foot soldiers of the night, then demi-demons themselves stood as something far more dangerous. They were the true heirs of the unholy union. Medieval demonologists often warned that demi-demons were deceivers by nature. At first glance, they appeared flawless, tall, strikingly beautiful, with an aura that drew mortals like moths to flame. Men and women alike described them as magnetic, impossible to resist. But this beauty was no gift. It was a weapon, a veil crafted to disguise the chaos burning in their veins. When their emotions surged, in anger, hunger, or battle, the mask slipped. Eyes once charming shifted to glowing crimson, their facial features twisting into grotesque forms. Skin darkened, veins bulged, mouths contorted into snarls that revealed not just fangs, but a glimpse of their true demonic essence. The more furious they became, the more horrific the transformation. And demonology warns, those who saw a demi-demon in their true form rarely lived to tell the tale. Physically, demi-demons were unmatched among hybrids. Males were often described as towering above 6 feet, their frames corded with unnatural strength. Females, though appearing slim and delicate, concealed equal, if not greater, power beneath their elegance. They were faster than any human, stronger than any vampire, and agile enough to scale walls or cross battlefields in the blink of an eye. Their senses, touch, taste, hearing, smell, were amplified to near predatory levels, allowing them to track prey across miles, even in total darkness. But brute strength was only the beginning. What truly set demi-demons apart, and what terrified demonologists the most, was their mind. They could read thoughts, piercing through the privacy of human consciousness. They could dominate wills, bending weaker minds into servitude with a glance or a whisper. They could unleash waves of terror, despair, or desire, manipulating crowds without lifting a hand. Some manuscripts claimed they could implant dreams, weaving illusions that drove men mad or lured them to their doom. This psychic power made them not merely predators of the body, but predators of the soul. Over time, their powers only grew. Where vampires stagnated, demi-demons evolved, unlocking magical abilities tied to their infernal ancestry. Some displayed raw telekinesis, moving objects, crushing bones, or hurling enemies across rooms. Others mastered elemental magic, channeling fire, shadow, or storms as natural extensions of their will. A few were said to conjure curses, binding entire bloodlines to illness or misfortune. All of these powers, demonology taught, were inherited directly from their demonic parent, a genetic memory of hell itself. But even demi-demons were not invincible. Unlike pure demons, their human half made them vulnerable. Holy relics, crosses, fire, and sacred texts did not destroy them as easily as they did vampires, but they weakened them, gnawing at their humanity, exploiting the very part of them that connected them to mortal blood. Worse still, demi-demons carried within them a curse, an endless hunger. Some craved blood like vampires, others devoured flesh, and some fed on intangible things: fear, desire, pain. Whatever the form, the hunger never ceased. It drove them, corrupted them, and reminded them constantly that they were not human, and never could be. Thus, demi-demons stood at a crossroads, stronger than vampires, but still tethered to human vulnerability, blessed with beauty, but cursed with monstrous transformations. Masters of psychic and magical power, yet haunted by the gnawing hunger of hell. They were both bridge and barrier between mankind and demons. And in the study of demonology, they became the ultimate warning, proof that hell did not simply seek to possess humanity, but to merge with it. But if demi-demons could hide their monstrous essence beneath a veil of beauty, then one question haunted demonologists for centuries. Could they breed? Could these hybrid horrors pass their curse into the bloodlines of men, creating dynasties touched by hell itself? The oldest demonological texts whisper of something more terrifying than the existence of demi-demons themselves, the continuation of their lineage. The Book of Enoch described the first hybrids, born of angels and mortals, as giants of destruction consuming the earth until it cried out for divine justice. But medieval demonologists took the legend further. They claimed that not all of these hybrids were destroyed. Some survived and learned how to reproduce. These unions were described as forbidden pacts, sealed not only by flesh, but by blood oaths and rituals. Human women, marked by demons, were said to bear children who carried fragments of infernal essence. Some appeared entirely human, their corruption dormant, until it awoke generations later. Others bore marks from birth, eyes of a natural color, voices that compelled obedience, or strange shadows that followed them in the night. Throughout history, entire families were whispered to carry this stain. Demonology texts speak of black bloodlines, noble houses, kings, and rulers who rose to power too swiftly, wielded too much charisma, and enforced their will with an almost supernatural command. Medieval chroniclers accused royal dynasties of being touched by hell. For example, in Eastern Europe, whispers claimed that certain vampiric houses descended directly from demon-human unions. In France and Italy, entire noble families were rumored to practice forbidden rites to preserve their unnatural beauty across generations. In England, legends of changeling heirs, children who seemed not quite human, were tied to the belief that royal blood was being manipulated by unseen forces. Even outside Europe, demonological folklore spoke of rulers with otherworldly ancestry. In Mesopotamia, kings were described as chosen of the gods, though some scholars now argue this phrase may have been a euphemism for something darker, bloodlines tied to Nephilim and hybrid beings. The most terrifying idea was that this curse could not be erased. Demonologists claimed that even if centuries passed and the blood of hybrids was diluted through countless marriages, the infernal spark could suddenly resurface. A child, seemingly ordinary, could grow into something monstrous, strength too great for their body, eyes glowing in the dark, voices echoing with power not their own. Some texts even warned that the Antichrist himself would not be born from pure demon or pure man, but from the careful cultivation of these hybrid bloodlines across generations, a grand infernal conspiracy stretching across human history. But how were such families identified? Grimoires provided chilling checklists, a tendency for madness or violent rage in certain heirs. Strange birth defects, webbed fingers, extra teeth, or unusual skin patterns, an unnatural resistance to illness as though mortality itself shunned them. And most damning of all, unbroken power across generations, where fortune and influence clung to them unnaturally, as if destiny itself were bent in their favor. To medieval minds, this was proof that something unholy worked behind the scenes. But if bloodlines could carry the infernal mark, then the question becomes even darker. How were such unions created in the first place? Was it always by force? Or did humans sometimes seek out the embrace of demons, willingly forging pacts to give birth to power? The grimoires of the Middle Ages were filled with warnings, not only of demons who preyed upon the innocent, but of humans who invited them in. Witchcraft trials across Europe recorded countless confessions, women and sometimes men who claimed they had taken demons as lovers. Some said they were tricked, seduced by visions of beauty, wealth, or forbidden knowledge. Others admitted to something far darker. They desired it. To them, these unions were not sins but sacraments, a ritual of flesh and power. Inquisitors wrote of witches lying naked within chalk-drawn circles, summoning incubus and succubus spirits. They claimed the act was more than carnal. It was a binding contract. The womb, or the seed, became an offering, and in return the demon granted strength, longevity, or magical gifts. Not only peasants and witches were accused. Scholars, alchemists, and secret societies were whispered to pursue the same goal, believing that the offspring of a demon-human union would be the perfect vessel, a child born with intellect beyond human limits, strength unshaken by disease, and senses sharpened by the fire of hell itself. The Malleus Maleficarum, one of the most infamous witch hunters' manuals, claimed that demons could disguise themselves as both men and women, taking forms of breathtaking beauty. To the lonely, the desperate, and the ambitious, they were irresistible, and once touched by them, few ever turned back. In folklore, certain witches were remembered as mothers of monsters. They were said to willingly bear children of demons, raising them in secrecy, teaching them forbidden rites, waiting until their hidden power awoke. Stories from Eastern Europe spoke of entire covens tasked with protecting such children until they reached adulthood. These offspring were said to grow rapidly, learn languages without instruction, and speak with voices that echoed like more than one being at once. In some tales, these children became rulers. In others, they became abominations, unable to contain the forces tearing through their mortal flesh. But perhaps the most damning accusation was this, that some humans betrayed their own kind. They did not resist the darkness. They chose it. For promises of eternal youth, wealth, or forbidden wisdom, they gave themselves and their unborn children to demons. To the church and to demonologists, this was the unforgivable sin. Not the act of being preyed upon, but the act of choosing to become the doorway. From the earliest Christian apocalypses, there was talk of an Antichrist, a figure who would rise in the last days, not fully human, not fully divine, but a mockery of both. To theologians, he was the false Messiah. To demonologists, he was something more chilling, the perfected hybrid. Where witches bore fragments of demonic taint and vampires carried only a shadow of infernal blood, the Antichrist was imagined as the culmination of every forbidden union. A child whose birth would not happen by accident, but by design. If Christ was the Son of God, born of a virgin by Holy Spirit, then the Antichrist would be his inversion, born of a corrupted womb, seeded by an infernal presence, not to redeem humanity, but to enslave it, not to lead by sacrifice, but by domination. Medieval texts imagined his conception as a ritual pregnancy, a woman consecrated not in purity, but in blasphemy, offering her womb to become the vessel of hell's chosen heir. And from this womb would emerge the perfect Demi-Demon, a being whose bloodline carried all that demonologists feared: seduction, immortality, sorcery, and unholy authority. Legends varied, but many traditions gave the Antichrist specific abilities that marked him as more than human: command over spirits able to summon demons not by spell, but by bloodright, unnatural charisma, the power to sway crowds with a glance, to unite nations with a word, counterfeit miracles, healing the sick, raising the dead, controlling weather and plague. Yet each miracle was poisoned at its root. Immortality by corruption, not eternal life as a gift, but a defiance of death through decay, feeding on the ruin of the world. To believers, these powers would deceive the masses. To demonologists, they proved the Antichrist was the endgame of hybridization. The book of Revelation spoke of a mark, a sign by which followers of the beast would be known. But demonologists expanded this. They claimed the Antichrist himself would bear a living mark upon his body. Some said it would be in his eyes, which reflected fire even in darkness. Others said it would be in his voice, which carried the resonance of something not human. Still, others claimed his very blood would hiss and burn when spilled, revealing its infernal nature. What terrified scholars most was not merely the Antichrist's power, but his purpose. For every vampire, every witch, every traveler touched by demons, they were all preludes. The Antichrist was not the first Demidemon. He was the last, the final synthesis of all hybrid bloodlines, risen at the appointed time to challenge Christ himself. To some, this was inevitable, the script of history, written by prophecy. To others, it was preventable, that if mankind resisted temptation, if witches were burned, if vampires were hunted, if demonic unions were stopped, then the Antichrist's birth could be delayed. But whether feared or accepted, one belief bound them all. When the Antichrist rises, humanity will know the face of the perfect hybrid. And so the Chronicles end where they began, with the warning that human desire for power, for forbidden knowledge, for unholy love, always carries a price. For in every whispered pact, in every secret union, the shadow of the Antichrist waits. Not a myth, not a metaphor, but the final Demi-Demon. They say history is a story of men and gods, but hidden between the lines is another story of shadows, of whispers, of bloodlines that never quite died. The witch at the crossroads, the vampire who walked the night, the secret pacts, the willing unions, the children who bore more than human blood, each tale a fragment, each legend a warning. For demonologists, these were never isolated myths. They were pieces of a single puzzle. A puzzle whose image revealed itself only in the end. A lineage that stretched across centuries, binding forbidden unions into one inevitable destiny. And at the center of that destiny stood the Antichrist, not as a distant nightmare, but as the final echo of every pact, every sin, every whispered invitation humanity ever accepted. The question is not whether such a being will come. The question is whether, in secret halls of power, in bloodlines we dare not trace, in the restless children of those who once consorted with shadows, he has already arrived. For the legacy of Demi-Demons is not a tale of the past. It is the mirror of the present, and, perhaps, the prophecy of tomorrow.